Hello, everyone. This is Aaron St. Dennis, the tongue-tied tonight, the FF Mad Scientist, and welcome to the Mad Science Lab podcast. Today, we are continuing on with the My Thoughts on My Team series, and joining me to break down his favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, is player profiler star Aaron Stewart, fresh off of a exhausting trip to Kansas City. He looks not really much worse for the wear. So, thanks for joining me, Aaron. How's it going?
Oh, thanks for having me. Doing well, doing well. Kind of getting back in the flow of things. Takes a little bit after a long weekend, but yeah, the draft's complete. We could say the offseason's done, right? Now we could properly analyze NFL teams.
Aaron St. Dennis, Aaron Stewart, Aaron Stu. There's way too many Aarons on the screen right now. I remember I was listening to one podcast and Matt Kelly was talking about, oh, Aaron was doing this yesterday. He wrote this or something. I'm going, the fuck is Matt talking about? I didn't write that. And I'm like, oh, yeah, Aaron Stewart, the other one. There's two. I think he said Aaron S or something. I'm going, wait, I didn't write that. Took me a second, but I guess that transitions perfectly into tell everyone where they can find you.
Certainly, I'm on Player Profiler. Most of my work, the big thing that you'll see is that on Player Profiler on our YouTube channel, you see those thumbnails. Most times that's me. That's me. I love designing thumbnails. Put out a little tweet. I said, really, the art of thumbnails is chopping people's heads off, putting on other people's bodies.
I've been working on my thumbnails, like this background and my intro there. I created it yesterday in between shows. But so I've been working on my thumbnails, and I seen your post, and I'm going, I'm sitting there trying to. What do you use for your thumbnails? I use Canva. Is that?
It's a combination. It's primarily Canva, but there's a few little tricks that you have to use Photoshop. Nothing
I'm terrible
too
at Photoshop.
It's a big learning curve, but man, I tell you, if you bite the bullet and it's you get those free evenings, take some time, kind of play around with it.
That's the one awesome I gotta master that, because I'd like to take my thumbnail game to a next level here. And right now I'm just going off of Canva, and they're they're not too bad, but they're kind of basic. There's nothing too fancy, but I see the ones where it's, you guys pointing, or it's, the player, and I'm going, damn, I wish I could do that. But all right, well, enough about me and my inadequacies. Let's transition here into your team. Just got to bring them up. That would be the Dallas Cowboys. I'm in hockey mode and almost said the Dallas Stars. The quarterback room here is pretty simple. If Dak Prescott is healthy, it's going to be Dak. And as a Dallas fan, I'm sure you hope to never see Cooper Rush. Dak somewhere in the range of QB 8, maybe? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm looking on Underdog at his ADP right now. Current, I guess, Best Ball Mania. He's going as QB 10. And last year was bad, right? So many turnovers. There were the Dallas Cowboy fan base, we're known for our rationality, right? So many people were.
I've got a coworker who would testify to that.
Right. Like, people were wanting like us to get rid of Dak Prescott. It's like, look, whether you love him or hate him, we're married to him. But like, even that bad season, like in terms of points per game, like he was like QB 13 last season in an objectively bad season. So going at QB 10, I mean, here's his finishes in the last few seasons: QB 13 this past season, QB 9, QB 3, QB 16, QB 11, QB 9. That doesn't even include the 2020 season, the year where he had the really bad injury that ended his season. He had his most points per game, but he just didn't play enough games to qualify. Like, QB 10 is fair. That is right where you want to draft Prescott. That most times that's where he's falling anyways. And you look at the Cowboy moves as well. I would anticipate them passing more. A lot of last season was they were a really good NFL team, and they wanted to rely on the ground game and a strong defense. Well, what's happened this year? I know Zeke wasn't very good last season, but they always wanted to make sure to run the ball. I think they were like number 5 in run plays per game. So there's no Zeke. I don't think
they're going to all that money. You have to run the ball.
Right. And with Pollard is great. He's a weapon. He's honestly Austin Eckler light. Like, he doesn't need to have all the work in the backfield. Like he's so efficient and as a pass catcher and just a weapon, but they're not going to suddenly give 30 carries to Pollard. And like you lose Schultz, I anticipate them wanting to air it out a little bit more than last season. So Prescott at his ADP, I go, why not? Is there a massive like top QB ceiling? No, but he'll get the job done. It's fine for him with another QB in best ball.
He's actually, with his current ADP, I own a ton of him and Tua in early drafts. Even in Superflex, like I'm getting him in the second round. Just they're falling, and I get it. He doesn't have probably the ceiling of the Burrow, Herbert, like the top tier, even the second tier, but he's got the safest tier outside of those top 6, and he's coming at a far cheaper price. So I think unless that ADP corrects itself, I'm going to continue to own a lot of Dak and Tua. Like I said, Dak I'm not nearly as worried about the injury. We have a broken leg. It was freak injuries. It's not really a repeatable one.
Exactly. Like I know it sounds kind of harsh, but in terms of injuries, like those freakish broken bone injuries,
that's not injury prone. That's bad luck.
Exactly. Like bones.
The guy who has a hamstring every 2 weeks, that's injury prone. A freak broken leg, like Tony Pollard, that was a broken leg too.
Yeah.
That's not injury prone. That's a freak accident. It happens. So.
And speaking of Pollard, I'm not worried going into the season. Like it was a really bad high ankle sprain, which that term is funny. We hear sprain and we think of like ligaments, but technically a high ankle sprain is a broken bone. If you know your anatomy there, it's that fibula.
Retired nurse.
Yeah. There we go. So like high ankle sprains, they suck. They definitely affect performance in that season, but like we shouldn't. And people heard the reports, broken bone. Yeah, because that's what it technically is. Like he's going to be fine. I'm not worried. And I'm pretty sure the Cowboys, they showed with their roster moves, right? They're not worried either. Like Deuce Vaughn was the only guy they brought in.
Yeah, I guess we'll transition with that into running back there. Tony Pollard, they have listed as the starter, obvious. Then it gets a little murky. You'd think Malik Davis would be the backup. Rojo, I assume, gets cut before training camp. And then Deuce Vaughn, who I would love to see succeed, but he's so small. It's so unlikely, but I did see that heartwarming video with his father there, so maybe he gets a chance, but I would say this is likely Pollard with Malik probably as the main backup. Maybe Deuce gets a few gadget plays. Pollard's the only guy I really want to own here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely Pollard. And I know that price tag's expensive, right? Currently on Underdog, he's RB7. He's a second round pick, ADP 22.8. And I know there's people that are always going to go touchdown regression. But this offseason couldn't have gone more perfectly for Tony Pollard, right? It's right now, there is no competition, but he's not the guy that needs to have all the work to score lots of fantasy points. Look at just this past season. He was one of the top fantasy running backs. And I'd honestly say if they brought in someone that could be better, it is an Austin Eckler situation of like, sure, let Joshua Kelly, right, for the Chargers go in and handle some of the in-between the tackle roles. Like, as long as Pollard's involved in the passing game and Dalton Schultz is gone, guess who's going to be the new, like, check down option for Dak Prescott? Mr. Tony Pollard. So it's on board with them. The price is right. We've seen the past couple of seasons, in particular, as his role has grown significantly, still super efficient with his touches. He's over 5 yards per carry. Anytime he catches the ball, it's not just check downs and he falls down. He makes plays happen. He's worth that price tag. But I will also say, I would expect a veteran running back to sign too. It's one of those like NFL business things.
Here.
It could happen. It's when people are like, wow, like, what was it? The Chiefs brought back Jerick McKinnon. It's a business thing where there's compensatory picks that are at play. Or if you sign guys, it affects potential draft picks you get, but that deadline has passed. So in the upcoming weeks, I'm sure we're going to see Leonard Fournette and Zeke and Kareem Hunt sign. And if one of those guys lands in Dallas, I'm not going to be surprised. But I'm also not going to be off Tony Pollard.
No, I'd love that. I think it'll sink his ADP a little bit. People will overreact to nothing, and I'll scoop up some shares. But moving on to the interesting wide receiver room with one guy who's a star, one guy who I love because he's always undervalued, and a bunch of people I don't really want anything to do with. We've got CeeDee Lamb, who is a star, Brandon Cooks, who is always undervalued, Michael Gallup, who is on the Michael Thomas health train. Then we have Simi Fehoko, Kavontae Turpin, and Jalen Brooks. Not particularly fond of any of them. Like I said, I think if I have early picks, I'm going to take some Lamb. I tend to always own Cooks because he goes in the 6th to 8th round where he shouldn't go. Other than that, I don't see a whole lot I really want to be invested in. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. We'll start with CeeDee Lamb. Like, there is this past season was make or break season, right? It was no Amari Cooper. It was what is CeeDee Lamb going to be in 2 seasons? Like, we'd seen some talent, but people are like, well, how good is he really? Hey, when Dak Prescott, who got injured in week 1 and he came back, there was the Detroit Lions as the first game, and I was there at that game. That was Dak. It took a little bit of time. You're like, okay, he needs to get some more reps. But that second game back from injury through the rest of the season, Prescott was starting to look a little more normal. And who was the biggest benefactor? CeeDee Lamb. Those final 12 games of the season, he scored 16 PPR points or more in 9 of those 12 games. Some of those games that he didn't score, like one was the Minnesota game where we just destroyed the Vikings. And I mentioned that and going, not only is CeeDee Lamb scoring good high amount of points at the wide receiver position, but he's also doing it consistently. Like, what's one of the things with Justin Jefferson is you get those massive weeks, but then like you have to deal with those games where you're like, man, really 4, 5, 6 points. CeeDee Lamb has the better floor, but still just consistently giving you top production as well. Love the price tag of wide receiver 8 on Underdog. Right now, he's basically going at the 1-2 turn, and that's about right. But him and Pollard are like the only 2 guys to feel really, really good about. Cooks, I would say, more than likely is going to be a value. He's going outside the top.
He always is.
Yeah, there's the disrespect for him. All he does, except this past season, but that was a unique situation, is he's just consistently scoring points. Usually when people are fading Brandon Cooks, that's the time to buy. He'll have a good season, and the next year the price tag goes up, and that's the time to get off. Like that's what Chris Bonagura and myself, we talked about on Stat Masters, is we follow these. We had an episode called ADP Whiplash, and we're seeing that with Cooks. You know, he's not dust, right? Like he might be up there in age a little, but he could still have some productive years. Wide receiver 41, that's not a bad price tag. There's no Dalton Schultz. I mean, outside of CeeDee Lamb, like Brandon Cooks could have a healthy target share on an offense that should pass more.
Absolutely. Finally, we have one of the more interesting tight end rooms in the league. I like all 3. Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, and Peyton Hendershot. I think all 3 have the potential and the talent to be, not Dalton Schultz, but they could be productive, but they could all be nothing. I would really like to see one of them win the job outright in camp and just be, 90% usage, as opposed to if they turn this into a tight end by committee, it makes all 3 of them completely irrelevant. I don't know. I think I own a couple shares of Ferguson. He would be my first choice, but who do you think wins this battle? Who would you like to see win this?
Oh man, honestly, I feel like it's going to be a committee, like because that's what the Cowboys
I don't want.
Doing. I know, and following ADP, if I'm going to draft a Cowboys tight end, more than likely I don't want to.
Hendershot,
the cheaper one, I'll go Schoonmaker of just going like he's literally like the last round, right? Where I mean, Jake Ferguson was he looked decent as a rookie last season, but like that's a tight end that if Schoonmaker is good at all immediately as a rookie, should be able to take over for Ferguson. Right now, Schoonmaker's tight end 34, right? The ADP 214.2 on Underdog. He really is like the 18th round dart throw that if you're like, oh, what's a tight end I could take a flyer on? I guess with Schoonmaker, I think more of my pivot is honestly going back to receiver. Michael Gallup at wide receiver 70. he tore his ACL in the 2021 season. And usually with players, when they tear their ACL, they don't look so good that first season back. It was remarkable that he played as much as he did. But people going, oh, man, he looks like trash. He looks like trash. Different position, different talent. But, like, I remember what people are saying about Saquon Barkley entering this past season. Oh, he's dust. He just isn't the Barkley of old, even though he dealt with torn ACL and all these injuries and stuff. Usually the rule of thumb as we start to enter like draft prep is the player suffers a major injury. Avoid them for the most part that first year. Like, it's a good bet. It's just avoid them. And then
year 2 ramp up with J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, exactly. And Gallup at wide receiver 70. I mean, just think of the NFL moves. Schultz, who continued to get targets and receptions from Dak Prescott. I don't think the combination of Ferguson, Schoonmaker, and Peyton Hendershot are going to replicate what Dalton Schultz did. And CeeDee Lamb, Tony Pollard, and Brandon Cooks, they're not going to get all of it, right? Like, so Gallup is set to benefit from that. His ADP is outside the top 160 overall, wide receiver 70. Like, we've seen some flashes pre-injury. Like, that's probably more of my pivot play is like avoid the Cowboys tight ends, but Michael Gallup that everyone's soured on now, sure, I'll take a flyer on him.
You seem to really know your best ball ADPs and underdog. So based on that, you got a target, an avoid, and a sleeper.
A target, avoid, and a sleeper. I'll go with I'm avoiding just Cowboy tight ends.
Okay.
My target is going to be Tony Pollard.
Oh, I like Dak.
Oh, yeah. And Dak is not bad. Dak's fairly priced, but I want like Pollard everywhere. You can build them. You can build so many different teams with them. And then my sleeper
makes Cooks the sleeper, or Gallup the sleeper, maybe.
Probably Gallup because he's going so late in drafts. It's 160, and if not him, you can. I'm assuming they're going to sign a veteran running back, but let's in best ball you got to attack drafts from all different ways. The other Cowboy running backs, which someone will get work in this backfield, whether it's a veteran or one of the guys. Deuce Vaughn at 210 ADP, Malik Davis 215.5. They're free, right? Like,
exactly.
To take some shots. Don't get overexposure on them, but sure, take a little flyers on those guys because Pollard's not going to handle all of the work in the backfield. It's still probably going to be like 60% for Pollard and 40% for someone in the backfield.
Good target for late rounds of Scott Fishbowl. That's what I'm thinking.
Oh, yeah.
So I've got them as 5th in the NFC last year at 12-5. Where do you think they finish in the division this year? And 12 wins, over, under, or the same?
I'm going to take under on the wins. Like, it just seems that they're going to regress.
Okay.
And Eagles are going to win this division. It's going to be the first time in 2 decades that a division winner repeats in the NFC East. That's a shocking stat, but like this division's weird. And I think the Cowboys are going to fall to 3rd place in the division. I'm going to say that the New York Giants are going to finish with a better record than us. So it'll be Eagles, Giants, Cowboys, and the lowly Commanders.
Oh, wow. That's a bold take there. Bold. All right, Aaron, you want to take one more shot here to tell everyone where they can find your work?
Sure. So you can find me a lot on Twitter by my handles at AaronStew09. I do all my work for Player Profiler. Going to start doing some more writing as well. It's been a little bit as we've been preparing for the NFL draft with that in the rearview mirror. Now I'm looking ahead, and and also I've got my own YouTube show on Player Profiler, Stat Masters, with my excellent friend and host Chris Bonagura. We do the show. We keep it to 25 to 30 minutes. We teach people how to use Player Profiler to get better at fantasy football. I believe very underrated show there. People need to check it out. It'll make you smarter at fantasy football.
I believe I have him on sometime next week anyways.
For the New York Jets?
Yeah, I was looking for a Jets fan, and I believe you might have tagged me in it. So,
absolutely.
It was on mine. All right, well, thank you for joining me. This has been my thoughts on the Dallas Cowboys with Aaron Stewart. Once again, I'm Aaron St. Dennis, the FF Mad Scientist, and thank you for joining me in the Mad Science Lab. Have a good night, everyone.